Socks and Underwear for Christmas by J. Wilburn. Eric didn't dare call this the worst Christmas ever. He was only 8 and really only remembered the last few. All right, since this is an edit block, let's get all the verbs correct. He didn't recall a Christmas without his siblings, but he imagined that might have been better. Daniela was 5 this year, Scott was 4, and baby Tony. I got another Tony in here. I'm using the name Tony too many times. All right, there you go. Baby Tony wasn't even 1 year old. There was zero chance that Eric getting any real attention this year. All of that was true as far as he could tell, but the real reason he wouldn't say this was a terrible Christmas was because he would break out in tears if he did. It wasn't even safe to think it, so he pushed those feelings down. This was a skill he would use often in later life. He was the biggest boy and wasn't allowed to cry. He held on as best he could with his nose stinging with the threat of those tears. Every time they took another picture of Tony the lump laying in front of the trees. I guess it would just be one tree. Laying in front of the tree. Let's say the decorated tree. We'll put a comma there too. He held back his sadness. All right. As Daniela and Scott opened toy after toy, Eric bit down on his sorrow. As he opened fewer gifts than any other kid in the house, he swallowed his jealousy as best he could. Mom must have seen it at least a little bit because she said, "You're bigger than them, so they get more toys, that's all." If that was all it was, Eric would have been fine, but he didn't really get much of anything this year. If you took away the clothes, it was really a sad haul indeed. The others got their lists cleared and his was hardly touched. He almost asked if he had been bad this year, but that was dangerous, so he just nodded and pretended to look at something across the room. Then someone remembered the stockings. They usually did the stockings first, but this year everyone forgot. Probably it was the new baby's fault. All sorts of treats and small toys they wouldn't have thought about poured out. Even Tony had his stocking stuffed full, and he was more interested in chewing on his fat little fist. Eric took a deep breath and dug into his stocking. Handful after handful of socks and underwear drew out and piled on the floor around his feet. It was like a cruel joke. Even his brother and sister, the ones not busy chewing their fists and pooping their pants, the ones not busy chewing its fist. No, let's do his fist, and pooping his pants, stopped to look upon this terrible sight. Okay, it would be that kind of sight, wouldn't it? Alright, the terrible sight. As he got his arm all the way down into the toe of the knitted stocking, not a stacking, it needs to be a stocking. Hopefully I won't have this many errors in every single sentence, or this will be a choppy reading. The truth dawned on him. That was all he had gotten. The underwear was in different colors, while the socks were striped or covered in odd little pictures. Let's add one more little sentence here to go with the thumbnail. One pair had the face of lambs with white ears sticking out. It wasn't even a cool animal like a lion, a bear, or a dog. Okay. Eric just stared at the island of socks and underwear burying his feet. He let the wadded stocking fall onto the pile. Daniela whispered something to Scott. They were a pair of conspirators most days of the year. Daniela sounded concerned, though, and Eric had to bite his lip. Their parents responded to the tension. Mom said, "You needed them." "Relax," Dad added. "There's plenty of candy in the house." Eric started to turn to leave. He had no idea where he was going, but he needed to be away from all this. "Don't leave all that in the floor," Dad said. Go try some on to be sure they fit," Mom said, "if you are going to your room." Eric struggled to gather up all that pitiful underwear and obnoxious socks. It was quite a struggle, especially as his eyes glazed over with tears. He had lost his battle against crying. Now he needed to retreat. As he shuffled blindly through the kitchen and toward the stairs, he heard his sister laughing. He almost turned to scream at her. That was too much to bear. This was too much to bear, but then he realized that the others were playing with their toys and had forgotten all about his humiliation. Somehow that was worse. He buried his face in the wad of clean underwear in his arms and ran up the stairs. He managed to muffle the first of his sobs, but Mom and Dad were busy. Got a little typo there. Were busy taking pictures of Tony's first Christmas. They cooed over the baby's smile as the lump gave a huge wet fart. All right. Eric managed to close his door with one elbow without slamming it. He collapsed on his bed, face down, in the contents of the worst Christmas stocking ever. He wanted to lock his door to keep his sister out, but he needed to get control of himself first. It was no easy task as he choked on his sadness as it released in a rush. Even if he was the oldest, he still deserved a good Christmas. Why couldn't they see that? That got him going again, and he was sure one of his parents would come up to scold him about being selfish. All that stuff about Jesus only getting 3 presents. He hoped it wasn't Dad, because Dad would yell and maybe do worse than that. Today was bad enough already. He sat up and his chest hitched a couple more times as the storm tapered off. His sister did not come to bother him, which would normally be quite a miracle. She was mean sometimes, but mostly she followed him around like a puppy, telling him every thought or thing that ever happened to her, even if he had been there to see it. He did his best to pretend to be interested because he liked her. Let me get the verb tense correct there. He liked her most of the time. And let me put a comma there. And Mom always said that she had to do the same thing for Eric. Daniela was busy playing with all her new toys. That almost got him going again, but he forced it all down. I'll say once more instead of again. He forced it all down once more. There was only so much sadness you could let out at a time, he decided. Eric showed his teeth and swept all those pairs of underwear and socks into the floor. He clenched his fists and growled. He wasn't sure who or what he was most angry at. Then he picked everything back up because he'd be in trouble if he didn't. Eric sighed and prepared to stuff those tear-dampened things into the proper drawers. But Mom had told him to try them on. He'd be in here until New Year's if he tried all of them on. Besides, it was cold, and stripping down to underwear and socks over and over made him let's say shiver. Made him shiver just thinking about it. All right, good stuff. I'll try it on, he growled. He pulled on a blue pair of underwear over his red pajama pants and started laughing. Then he put on a long pair of pink and brown striped socks over his let's say the cuffs of his pajama pants. He laughed some more. Why would they buy him pink socks anyway? That pink and brown pattern reminded him of eating ice cream at his grandma's house, but he couldn't remember why. All right, he pulled on a yellow pair of undershorts, then an orange pair after that. He pulled on more socks covering the pink ones. He buried those lambs' faces under more and more socks. After that, he paused. I'll try on all of them, Eric giggled. It started to get tight. His toes tingled and his belly felt pinched. along with other parts. But he managed to put on every single pair of underwear and socks at the same time. He wished he had a mirror in his room, but as he stood with a great effort, his feet looked like astronaut boots, and his underwear stack made him look like he was wearing one of Tony's full diapers. If he ignored the pinching and the full diaper look, he could almost imagine himself as a superhero. He lifted his closed fists into the air and declared, "I have the power of all the underwear in the world." That sounded to him more like something a supervillain would say. He started to bend over with laughing, but the tight underwear took his breath, and then the ceiling and roof over his room blew away into the sky. He stared in shock at the pieces as the pieces of the house broke up as they rose into the blue and rose into the blue sky. Let's say. I like the idea of not using sky there, but I think it's clearer if I do. Rose into the blue sky and presumably all the way into space. Cold wind bit through his pajamas and stole any illusion that this was just his imagination. "I have to fix this," he whispered, even though the wind would have covered over his shouts. Power coursed through his body, from his numb feet, through his bundle of underwear he wore, and deep into his bones. It was too much power to contain, so he released it in the same cathartic rush he had done with his tears and sadness. Eric launched into the air and soared away over the neighborhood and the town below. He saw the highways and even his school from this height. He laughed again, even as the cold air brought tears heavy into his eyes that had nothing to do with being sad. "If I'm going to keep doing this, I'll need a mask and a cool name. Maybe I'll need a sidekick too, just like the other." He was struck hard from the side and tumbled through the high winds out of control. He had no point of reference for this type of impact or pain. Older men would have said they'd been hit by a truck or a train. Eric thought at first he had flown too high and was struck by the nose of a passenger jet. What if he had knocked the plane out of the sky as well? All those people, their families. Eric got his descent under control and turned in the air to see if whatever hit him was falling too. He only just caught a blur of motion before it hit him again in the center of his chest. Eric fought to get free as they plummeted to the ground, but the other figure, an adult wearing a mask and a green uniform with a cape, held on. All right. I'm going to put another comma there because I think that'll be clearer. All right. He struck a grassy field. They struck the grassy field together and tore a deep trench through the ground that uprooted a fence on the far side of the field before they came to a stop. "Who are you?" Eric choked, still shocked to be alive. The adult in the green uniform picked Eric up and slammed him down on the ground again. The brown grass was still thick, but the earth underneath was frozen and it felt like bouncing off concrete. "I'm your nemesis, you little jerk. These skies are mine and you will suffer." Eric already felt like he was suffering. He was only 8, and this was quite violent, not to mention he had only just learned how to fly. He gave a little squeak of pain as he tried to catch his breath, where he twisted on the frozen ground. "Are you gonna cry? You look like you want to cry. Did Mommy not love you enough and give you anything good for..." Eric punched at the man's legs and green boots. The man just tilted his head back as he laughed. They were just 8-year-old punches. They were just 8-year-old punches after all, let's say. I think that makes the sentence clearer. He lifted his boot, and Eric only just rolled out of the way before the nemesis stomped a crater into the ground where Eric had been lying down. The man rushed forward and kicked again before Eric could move aside. He punted the boy across the field where Eric bounced to a stop. Eric struggled to his feet and gasped for breath as the nemesis took his time walking toward him. The guy was saying something but was too far away for Eric to hear. He tried to summon all his strength and launched himself into the air again. As the nemesis took flight, Eric turned suddenly and rocketed into his chest, blasting the man several feet down into the dirt. There was an extended silence before globs of red clay and bits of frost ejected from the soil. The nemesis did not fly out the way Eric expected. The man's uniform was torn and blood leaked from one ear as he tried to climb from the hole. Eric stepped forward and started stomping on the guy's head. The man gargled and spit as he tried to speak through the onslaught, but succeeded in making no real words. Eric screamed as he pounded the guy into the ground. Are you gonna cry? All right, let me put an exclamation point there too. Are you gonna cry? Are you sad now? All right, there we go. When he stopped, the nemesis lay very still. Eric looked around to be sure no one was watching. His first thought was to fly far away. His second was to hide what he had done. Eric flew around the field, gathering up armloads of dirt, and covered the hole with the nemesis in it. As he was about to take flight again, a roar filled the world. Eric first looked down at the disturbed earth of what might have been a grave. He looked at the sky and saw the creatures in flight. There were three of time. What was I saying? There were three of them. All right. Dragons, Eric whispered. I hate dragons. He launched into the air and met the beasts in the sky. They doused him with fire from 3 directions, but his underwear and socks were thick enough to protect him. He flew around the creatures, being careful to avoid their spiky tails. They breathed fire on each other, and soon the dragons fought among themselves. Eric laughed as they flew away, destroying each other instead of him. He clapped his hands together and said, another job well done. Next, his super hearing picked up the scared meows of a cat. He followed the sound and found the kitten up a tree. This was old school superhero work. Eric reached out his hands as he floated near the top of the tree. Come on, little buddy, I'll help you. Ouch! The kitten clawed him, and Eric pulled away. The small cat climbed down the tree all on its own. Fine, have it your way. I was only trying to help. Merry Christmas. I'm going to italicize that as if it's being said sarcastically. Merry Christmas. Alright. Then his super hearing picked up his dad's footsteps. This story is obviously a projection of Jay's fear of ever having children. I have 2 kids. What are you talking about? The cold wind still blew. His room... Oh, no, here we go. Then his super hearing picked up his dad's footsteps on the stairs at their house across town. Eric raced back, flying low to the ground and dodging power lines. He landed on the floor of his bedroom as his dad crossed the hallway. The cold wind still blew. His room was missing the ceiling and roof along with parts of his walls. His dad would not be happy. Eric reached out his hand and closed his eyes. He whispered, by the power of my underwear and socks, bring the house back together. From space, all the pieces of his house re-entered the atmosphere. Somehow, they did not burn up as they formed back together over him. He opened... Get the tense correct here. He opened his eyes with his arms still spread. The ceiling was in place. He couldn't see what the roof looked like from the outside. He hoped for the best. There were more cracks in the ceiling than before, and sprinkles of white dust fell in a couple spots on the carpet as his father opened the unlocked bedroom door. Time for lunch, kiddo. Dad stared for a moment, and Eric finally dropped his arms to his sides. Okay. He started to walk toward the door, but his dad didn't move out of the way. Eric looked up into his father's face, expecting to get in trouble. A hint of a smile pulled at the corner of the man's mouth, and then Dad fought that off the way Eric fought his tears. What are you wearing? Eric looked down at the spaceman boots of socks and the full diaper look of all that underwear. Everything. I'm wearing all of it. Dad sighed and turned away. You look ridiculous. Get all that off and come down to lunch. Eric got started. It was going to take a while to get it all off. A piece of ceiling fell and hit him in the back of the head. Eric brushed the debris aside and went on removing all those socks.